Hi, welcome to today's session of the office hours. Today we're going to be discussing the Jenkins X roadmap, which has just been outlined. Also, one of the proposals and one of the main bodies of work for that roadmap is a decomposition of Jenkins X, which Gareth Evans has been working on. And then we will discuss versioning and have a group discussion on JX requirements versioning led by Dave Conde. So what I will do is I'll share and we can look at the roadmap together. So this roadmap was created kind of in response to a lot of community questions we had about the project's direction and just sort of an, just general sense of like what's coming next and what are we working on, what are we really excited about, and to be a forum for greater discussion with the community as well, because we are open to feedback on any of these items on the roadmap. So the roadmap is now published as part of our docs on the Jenkins X IO site. It's in the community section. It's titled Roadmap. There are a couple pieces which are already being worked on. So we have the Bring Your Own Vault, which Hardy's been working on and presented last office hours. We're also working on having more granularized permissions and OpenShift support, and Daniel presented on that as well last office hours. And both of those demos have been sort of trimmed out and put up on our Jenkins X YouTube channel. So you can always find them there under the tutorials. We're also working on greater work on custom build packs. So this provides more flexibility for users to create custom build packs. Is that correct, Gareth or Dave? You guys can jump in.
Yes, yeah, there was I think an issue with using custom build packs and boot together. They kind of didn't play particularly nicely, but this kind of makes it I suppose custom build packs more of a first class citizen within boot.
Yeah, I think the original issue came in, it was a bug in JX edit build packs, that it was designed to work with non-GitOps Jenkins X before boot came along. So Adam did a bit of work to basically get it configurable within the requirements, so it's a bit easier to set this stuff up from.
Nice. Good. And the Kubernetes compatibility with 1.16, which we've been discussing a number of times in office hours, and it's ongoing work, but that is going apace. I think that might be done.
It's basically done.
Yeah.
I think there could still be apps that need to be updated, but I believe that the core stuff is done.
Do we have any BDD tests running against it? Yeah.
I have run BDD tests against 1.16. That's how I found like the UI needed to get updated. But our BDD tests are still running against 1.14 by default. They had to kind of hack things to get them to run against 1.16. But yeah, I think we're pretty much good.
Nice. And then near term, which is work that is in the pipeline but hasn't really kicked off yet. We would like to integrate more with Tecton Catalog. That is a proposal which is under consideration. Here is a link to an issue which has not been, it's an issue for discussion. It hasn't been that well seeded out, so we will probably be adding to these issues which are linked to from the roadmap to kind of give greater context to enable people to have more to bounce off of. But please do jump in with your thoughts. And then major component pluggability as well. We have an issue here. Same thing, it needs maybe more context. And then technical debt reduction and improved architecture, which Gareth is going to talk to us about. We have some things under future work, but we'll just leave those there for now, and we'll let Gareth talk about improved architecture and decomposition. Are you happy me being on this page, Gareth, while you talk, or I could stop sharing and we will?
Yeah, no, you can stay on that page, or if you want to, you can click on the that enhancement. See James Strachan's comment on there with a link.
Yes.
That one there, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think looking at who was on the call, most people have seen this. This is a proposition to start to decompose certain aspects of Jenkins X, and I suppose it's like the key is do it in a kind of manageable way where we don't stop development for a period of time. We want to do this like constantly, iteratively, slowly pull out small libraries. And the first one that we're actually looking at doing is JX API, which is basically the CRDs and a few extra components around install requirements. So this may actually lead on quite nicely to what Dave is going to speak about later. I'm not entirely certain what he's going to speak about, but I think it will fit. But the idea is if we can take the CRDs out, put them in a nicely versioned library, which other things can depend on. When it comes to writing new components for JX, you don't need to depend on the entirety of the JX library, which brings in an awful lot of dependencies and sort of stuff.
And this JX API work with the JX CRDs, this is the work that you were just saying is largely complete.
Yeah, so the API exists. It has all the code generation stuff. We do need to work a little bit more on the documentation side of it. Although all the generated docs are there in the same way as they were for Jenkins X. And you can use it with, if you use it with the JX Cube client together, it does work really nicely. So in the SaaS, we depend on these components quite a lot to make extension modules for JX to be able to do what we need to do. In OSS, Lighthouse is a prime example of this. At the moment, Lighthouse has a dependency on the entirety of Jenkins X, and that's a dependency that we want to break. It doesn't need to do that. It only needs the API part. So yeah, so this is like a stepping stone to try and get us in a slightly better place.
Great, super interesting. Andrew, do you want to talk about the work that's being done with Lighthouse?
We're just trying to take advantage of this the decomposition and get it so that eventually Lighthouse will depend on various libraries rather than JX code base itself.
What is it that Lighthouse actually depends on in JX?
Some various cruft that can be cleaned up, but just hasn't been yet. The API, which should, and clients, which should change very shortly, and meta pipeline stuff, which is what I'm working on right now, actually.
The meta pipeline stuff would make a really nice candidate to be separated out so people can reuse it.
That's what I'm stabbing at right now, figuring out how to encapsulate all the stuff that we need for generating and kicking off a meta pipeline, such that it could be teased out with a bunch of other stuff that has to come with it, but trying to keep that as slim as possible.
I think, Terry, the app that you developed, the Sonar app, was like, I think access to the meta pipeline API would probably have been useful for that one.
Yeah, so I did actually try to use that, but there were a number of issues where it didn't actually behave the way it needed to be able to use it to modify the pipeline. So right now that app is actually just text parsing. So once we've got that fixed, then we can retrofit that back into the app.
Cool. I love the logo.
Good. And Gareth, was there anything more you wanted to add about the decomposition proposal, or does anyone have any questions for Gareth?
I didn't have anything extra to add. But yeah, any, like I actually see this, the decomposition stuff, you know, it's something that we should keep on doing. Like as we find, I don't like the idea of planning a massive sort of breakdown of everything up front, because I don't think we know yet what where our pain points are. So what we're trying to do is pull out, for instance, the API first, and then work out what the pain points are of trying to get that integrated in with things like Lighthouse and some of the SaaS components and maybe some other JX apps. So there will be other stuff happening to make this easier. So if anyone has any ideas of reusable modules or better ways that we can do stuff, yeah, we'd love to hear that.
And where would be the best place on that issue?
Yeah, I think so, on that issue, or if you don't want to comment on the issue, just ping us on the dev channel. That's absolutely fine. Yeah.
Nice. Does anyone have any other questions on the roadmap? Or any other things you'd like to see on the roadmap?
I'd like to see something around notifications on the roadmap.
Yes, that would be very good. And now that the roadmap is up, it is not in any way in its final form. This will be a continual iterative process. So we'll review every couple months. AKS support would be very good, and CAD as well. But in addition, like as at any point you can raise an issue, and I suppose the place to raise it would be, as Ethan's done, he's raised issues on different areas of the roadmap. So just either add to those areas or make a similar issue on a proposal that you have, and just make sure to label it a roadmap issue, and then we'll address it within that context.
Whereabouts is that hosted at the moment? It's up on the Jenkins X docs, is it?
Yes, yes. It's in the community section, actually, because it is trying to communicate more clearly with the community. So that's good. And speaking of which, Dave, you wanted to talk about versioning for JX requirements.
Yeah, so we've had a few discussions among some of the engineers recently around JX requirements. So like the way I see it is JX requirements is one of our contracts with our users. Is where people go in to configure their setup for Jenkins X, and that evolves over time as we add more features and functionality. Newer versions of Jenkins X support new features, but as it stands right now, we don't really have any versioning in place in the YAML that is used to describe the functionality. And what we have attempted to do is basically when a new feature gets added, we try to keep the contract backwards compatible with people. So if you use an older version of Jenkins X, it's not necessarily going to break anything. But we don't have any versioning or anything like that in place. In the there's no schema for it, for example, with proper versioning. So what we've spoken about doing, but we haven't really come to a conclusion on it, is like introducing some kind of a version number to the requirements that we could then use to bump that to say that this specific version of Jenkins X supports this version of the requirements. So I just wanted to have a little bit of a chat to see if anybody'd seen a nice way of doing that in another product or anything like that, or any libraries that are used to do versioning of Go structs that work quite well, that we could leverage, or if people just think that it's a good idea to do that.
I think I mentioned this to you before, Dave. Scaffold do this quite nicely between their config files. They're all nicely versioned, and they provide an upgrade path and like a fix command where you can basically uplift your config file to the latest version at any point in time, which is quite nice. But if you happen to be using an old version, it uses the same code to before it loads into memory.
Do you have to have like multiple implementations of the serialization code to be able to do that then? Is that how it works?
They use different CRDs. Oh, not CRDs, but different structs. So they have like version structs that go through.
Okay.
And the code internally always depends on, I think it's the latest, but then there's a whole package that does the jumping from one version to the next. Yeah.
Okay. Has anybody else seen anybody that does this nicely, or any libraries that could help with it?
Yes. First of all, I must say I like it. And second point, actually I didn't know that Scaffold could version that much, but good to know. And I know CNI does a very good job with this. You know, CNI, Container Network Interface,
Oh yeah.
which is widely used, not only in Kubernetes, but also. And obviously they need to stay compatible, backward compatible, and therefore they are using the latest Ghost tract. But for them, it's actually more complex as for us, I guess, because they are also working with multiple plugins which are passing through these tracts, while each plugin may have support for a different version. So they have a struct for each version, and then the struct also contains the raw contents. And based on these raw contents, these structs can be converted to others as well, and back and forth, I think, even, which is even more than we need. Yeah.
And you can also consider the Kubernetes namespacing approach.
Is that based off of the package? So it's like it basically has a URL at the top of the.
Yeah, so you define a URI as the namespace, and then that actually connects you to the specific code that you need for that implementation.
Okay, that's nice. There's one thing we've discussed a little bit. We haven't really gone into much detail on it. Is the possibility of having contributed configuration from the likes of apps, and how that would get represented in something like requirements. So the ability to be able to have like extensible configuration. Maybe the addition of namespacing like that would be a nice way of helping with that.
I think that's going to be essential if you want to grow it in that way. You're going to need to have an extensible namespace that you can manage appropriately.
Cool.
But the other thing we're obviously going to have to consider as part of this is that it's not sufficient to just version the JX requirements. We're also going to have to look at the versioning for things like the build packs and the quick starts, because they're obviously all interconnected.
Mm. One thing that I find can be a little bit confusing sometimes is the actual version of Jenkins X which is used within builders. So we have the ability of specifying specific builders within pipelines and places like that. What can happen sometimes is you can specify a version of Jenkins X which might be older, or older than the current version within the cluster, and it doesn't always necessarily get bumped. That can create some issues sometimes around reading something slightly differently compared to what you think it might be. I think a better way of ensuring that your images are up to a certain level would be nice to have. I know we have something in the version stream around locking stuff, but it doesn't always ensure that stuff is fully up to date.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of scenarios around this. We have got some documentation. There is an issue on versioning which is in the repository, but I think we need to expand that out to cover all the scenarios, and then look at which bits we can do easily and which bits will actually need a change of architecture to really get them working.
Yeah. Okay. I'll put that down as a potential architecture around this stuff.
And just to give you a reference example, I think when the Helm file work was going on, there must have been a change to some of the build packs to support the syntax for some of that, and that effectively leaks out into everybody's cluster, regardless of whether it's been upgraded or not, changing the behavior of those clusters. So I've had a fairly busy time having to go back and work out how the behavior of my installed environment has changed, because something in a build pack has changed, and that code has escaped into a production environment. So we need to be able to tie the build packs and quick starts to installed instances. Otherwise, we are going to run into situations where you're definitely going to get a mismatch between what's in a builder in an installed environment and what's expected for a particular version of a build pack and its pipelines.
Okay. Have you seen that happen anywhere else, Terry, apart from build packs or quick starts?
And we have seen various examples in the past. I think we've nailed quite a few of them down now, but as we're starting to evolve more and more of the code base, we're starting to hit more examples of
Sorry, you broke up there for a second.
Sorry, yeah, I think we've seen quite a lot of examples of that in different places in the past. Going to a standardized release has helped, and having the version stream has helped, but that's only versioning part of the solution rather than all of it at the moment.
Yeah.
So we just need to get everything into that view of the world, and then we can enforce some consistency.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, you've also got to consider apps in that scenario, because they will also have an effect on people's environments.
Yeah. There's a couple of different ways of looking at that, I guess. It's like, I like the idea of having in a version stream versions of apps that are supported. But I kind of like the idea of an app can also say that it supports a specific version of Jenkins X, so that you reverse the relationship of that, so that you can have apps living external to the Jenkins X ecosystem, but they're still able to specify, I can work in this cluster as long as it supports up to this version range. Okay, I've taken a few notes down that I'll try and get some of this stuff back into issues. I know there's issues around some of it already. But, yeah, okay, thanks. That was a really good, interesting conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting about apps. The difference in what you were just talking about, Dave, would that mostly be along the lines of if Jenkins X is officially supporting an app versus an app coming from the community? Say if one day we have an apps marketplace where not all of them are officially supported, but we do want them to be able to say which versions of Jenkins X they work with.
Yeah, that's basically what I was thinking. That I like the idea of people should be able to develop apps and not have to necessarily push changes into our version stream to get them supported, but still be able to freely distribute them. Maybe a company's working on their own apps and they don't want to have them officially released or something like that, but it's still good to have a way to be able to say, this is supported up to a specific version, and work away with that one.
Nice.
And that might have to relate to specific versions of APIs rather than just releases. You know, for example, if we're looking at the Sonar Scanner app, that would have a reliance on a particular version of a pipeline syntax. So if we were going to modify that, we would need a mechanism to notify people of changes of the pipeline API, and we'd have to define if there was a breaking change in that API, for example.
Yeah, that comes back to the decomposition work, I think, quite a bit as well. That you know, if we could base, you know, be very good around our semantic versioning that we do with the bits of Jenkins X that we pull out into, you know, reusable parts, that we should be able to leverage it in that use case. Yeah.
Nice. If we are ready to wrap up that discussion or to bring it on to GitHub issues in the future, we also have an issue that's been raised by Ankit, which is great because the office hours are meant to be really open to the community, you know, meant to have you bring your questions or the issues you're most interested in. Ankit, would you like to read this issue? Would you like to share your screen?
Oh, you can share, it's fine. It's
Okay. Yeah.
So this issue was opened, I think, some days back as well, 7 days back. So I don't think we support this kind of, yeah, like we don't support this right at this point in Jenkins X. Do we? If not, then this is actually like a good feature to add.
Now, as far as I'm aware, yeah, it's not something we support at the moment.
Okay.
Is it a particular version of Kubernetes that the sudo stuff works with?
I think it works in version 1.18, but I'm not sure if it works with 16 and 17. I have not tried, but I can check and actually give you a much better answer.
Yeah, that'd be. I mean, it's certainly a feature that I've never used, but I can see it could be useful.
Yeah, I've never seen that before either.
But yeah, that was the I was thinking to kind of like anything called the so I was thinking to work on this sometime maybe next week if no one else is actually like
so the way that stuff works right now, so the way that stuff works right now is we basically use whatever is in the user's kube context that's right. Saved on their machine.
Yes.
I wonder if it's possible to have a kube context that just assumes a role, or is the functionality just for one command? I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it would be good to have more discussion over an issue on that one.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to take a look at it. So okay. I'll see what I can do.
Good. And the issue is open, so we can continue discussion on it. Nice. Great. Was there anything else someone wanted to talk about? Ankit, would you like to discuss AKS support on the roadmap?
Yes, I think we should have that. I mean, Azure is a pretty big cloud. Like, yeah, I mean, it's about as big as Google and like others. So not having that support is going to be a problem, I think. I think it's a nice to have feature. I can take a look at it. That's all I'm going to say.
Victor, did you want to talk about that one a little bit?
I don't have anything special, to be honest.
Okay. I know it's being looked at, but so there has been some contributions around the Terraform modules. I think there were some pull requests in around it last week.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're talking about Azure, yes.
Yeah.
That started. We got the first pull request, but it is very raw yet. So I don't think that anybody should use it still. It's more like indication that the work started, not necessarily something that is in any form usable yet.
It's still, I think it's still not like, yeah. So I mean, it's probably like a work in progress, right? So
yeah, it's a AKS cluster with a few things, but not with things that Jenkins X really needs. It's almost equivalent to AZ create cluster, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Has there been any impact analysis done on the GitHub renaming master repositories?
This is a good question. Does it affect Jenkins X?
I haven't seen anything. That doesn't mean there isn't anything. Andrew, have you seen anything around any of this stuff?
Nope. I mean, theoretically, it shouldn't be too hard to change from master to main or something like that, but I have not seen anything on that front, nor have I worked on that front yet.
When they made the change, was it just an alias? Like, they haven't removed the old functionality.
So I don't know what the nature of the change is, but obviously it's been proposed as a new default. And I did a quick look, and I think we've got about roughly 2,000 references to master in the code base. Now, I don't know how much of that is automatically generated and how much of it is actually hard coded, but there's quite a lot of references.
Yeah, I think we'll have to have a look at the change and see, if that's the new default for Git providers, then we'll have to look at it. But I think we'll also have to keep in mind the fact that we're supporting other Git providers as well. So maybe it makes sense to externalize that config or something so that it's a bit better isolated. Okay, I guess that's another one to create an issue for, and we can discuss it.
And on the subject of naming, Ankit has asked about renaming build packs, which has come up as an issue on the repo, but also in the Slack channels. There is somewhat of a community confusion than the very wider community on build packs, because there are CNCF build packs. And this, how to approach this has been discussed in a number of different ways. We've thought about doing a complete overhaul, but that is a lot of work, not just in the docs, but also the code and all sorts of aliases and needs to be done. And so one of the solutions that has been proposed has been that we would make clarifications in our documentation. And in many ways, this is to clarify the situation and remove confusion, and to do so in a way that's maintainable and really feasible, not an overwhelming amount of work for the issue, but also the build packs themselves might be something that's evolving for Jenkins X. Would anyone like to speak more about this?
I can talk a bit about that one. Basically, there's some work happening around a Tekton interoperability group. So we're currently involved in discussions around that. And as part of that, we're looking at potential integration with the Tekton catalog. And that could involve renaming of build packs and an overhaul to make stuff a bit more standard with other communities.
I think there's also been propositions for integration with the CNCF build packs as well. Buildpacks.io as a way of producing projects.
Yeah, that is very exciting work in the interoperability space. So in effect, addressing this question on build packs, although we need to do it specifically in our documentation in the immediate future, in many ways it's on the roadmap, but just not in name, because this forms part of our potential integration with Tekton catalog. Do you have any more questions about that, Ankit, or anyone else?
No, I'm fine.
Any other issues people would like to talk? Any other questions? And if you you can ask them now, but also for future office hours, please do put the issues you're interested in discussing on the doc, which is linked to in the calendar invite. And as well, you can put if you would like a demo on a certain subject or feature. And not guaranteed we'd be able to arrange it immediately, but it is something that we could put on our future agenda for office hours, and we could try and arrange that demo for you.
We might even be able to find an expert in the area.
We might. That's the idea. So any other questions? Things to discuss? Okay. All right, good office hours. Thanks, you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.